Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Adventure Crossing America. So Crossing America is a collaboration between Expeditions in Education, us, and the National Park Foundation, and we're very grateful for their support. Today, we're at the Hot Springs National Park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, with our newest friend, Ranger Kane. Ranger Kane, thank you so much for having us here.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
A little rainy outside, but you had a beautiful place for us to come and interview in, so we thank you for your accommodations.
No problem.
So our kids are so excited about national parks, and they love watching rangers speak, but they also are interested in how did you get to this job today? So can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
So it's been a wonderful life to live, working with the national parks, in the national parks all around the country. And so being a National Park Service Ranger is a combination of my interests in history, in the environment, in education. But I actually did not start out as a park ranger with that in mind. I was working in museums, I was a trained historian, I was working in schools. But then one day I volunteered at Rock Creek National Park, or Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. And I was getting to tell people stories about early American history, about the history of Washington, D.C., and some days I was speaking in Italian and Spanish and French to people from all over the world. And from that point on, I was sold. And so what I started to do between my years in graduate school was be a seasonal park ranger, usually at parks out west, from the smallest national monuments to the biggest name parks. So I started out in Timpanogos Cave National Monument in Utah. And then I worked at Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve in Colorado. And then I got up to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming and Joshua Tree National Park in California. And I loved to tell the stories of the landscape, the human stories of the landscape. And so I was working as a national park ranger all throughout the American West. But I also believe that national parks are the best places to explore and learn about the complicated and confusing and entangled history of the United States. And so most recently, I was moved to Washington, D.C. again, and I worked at Arlington House, the Robert E. Lee Memorial, where we talked about Civil War memory inside of Arlington National Cemetery.
And then you ended up here at Hot Springs National Park. So something drew you here. And did I hear earlier that you're actually originally from Arkansas?
I am from Arkansas. Who knew that my national park journey would bring me back to my home state? And I remember somebody was asking me right when I was living in Arlington, and they said, what would be your favorite national park to work in? And I said, to be honest, it would be to work at Hot Springs, where they tell this really unique, amazing story, and I can live in this place and tell the stories of the state that I grew up in.
Well, then we're ready to hear this story. So go ahead. What makes this place special? Tell us the story of Hot Springs.
Okay. What sets Hot Springs apart, first of all, is its age. So we were actually set apart as Hot Springs Reservation in 1832. And this was the first time in the history of the United States that public lands were set aside for the use of the public. And the federal government, they didn't really know what to do with that. This was going to be 40 years before Yellowstone is set aside. And so our legislation is sort of limited, and people aren't really sure what it means to have this public park. But it was about 40 years later, in the 1870s, around the time that Yellowstone is set aside, that Hot Springs will have its first superintendent. There will be clearer legislation about protecting the water, about the bathhouses, about making sure that everyone has access to the parks. And then in 1921, we get renamed as Hot Springs National Park but we had already been a park for 90 years. And so when you're at Hot Springs, you can tell the 200-year history of American conservation. We've been testing the idea of what it means to be a national park for nearly 200 years.
Well, this is one of the places where you see such a holistic view of good health, right? So tell us about why people came here and what was the theme of this place?
Sure. So when we think about Hot Springs today, it's still a unique story because this is basically a giant nature hospital. The water, the trails, the bathhouses, they have all been protected for the health and wellness of its visitors. So we wanted to make sure that all classes of Americans would have access to the healing waters of this place. And so when we walk through these buildings along Bathhouse Road here in the Fordyce, we are essentially in monuments to health and wellness about how you're supposed to eat, who you're supposed to be around, what you're supposed to do to keep your body healthy, types of treatments that might be beneficial. And so we can explore this America's health journey through this park. And so whereas a lot of parks are about scenery or the environment or maybe a historical event, Hot Springs is really about the history of healthcare and healthcare access in the United States. And that is a story that we take a lot of pride and responsibility in understanding these personal and also national journeys.
Well, if I step outside this building, the Fordyce, and look down, I see a lot of similar buildings. So these are all bathhouses?
Absolutely. So Bathhouse Row is a National Historic Landmark. That means that we are one of the highest priority preservation locations in the United States. It also means that today, if you visit, it's the most intact group of bathhouse buildings that you'll find in the United States. Now, you can go to other places, Saratoga Springs in New York. They had a place in Michigan called Battle Creek Sanitarium. You could go to French Lick, Indiana. You could have gone to some bathhouses in Virginia, Warm Springs, Georgia, Glenwood Springs in Colorado. These are all places that around the turn of the 20th century, people were trying to go find the next best hope for them in their healing journey, their next healing place. But Hot Springs today is the best preserved of this generation of health and wellness, commonly called the golden age of bathing in the United States.
Where is this water coming from?
Well, this water today came down just like the water that's outside right now. So this is rain that falls into our recharge zone. And the recharge zone is actually much bigger than the park itself. We are actually still doing geological studies to understand the specific boundaries of the recharge zone. So there was active science going on here. But that water, its journey is going to be 1,000 plus year journey. It's going to take about 4,400 years for this rainwater that's falling to go down through the cracks of the Arkansas Novaculite and the chert formations and then reemerge heated and filtered from the 40 plus springs that exist today.
This building that we're in, the Fordyce building, has a lot of interesting places here, including what we're standing in now. Can you tell us a little bit about this particular bathhouse?
Sure. So when this bathhouse was built in the heart of the golden age of bathing, it was meant to be the most impressive bathhouse in the world. It was supposed to have all of those medical uses for water to heal someone's body and someone's soul and somebody's heart. And so if you come in here today, you'll be able to see the men's bath hall with its beautiful stained glass and its tile floor, in addition to the bathtubs themselves and the marble appointments. And so it's a very, very fancy medical building. But then if you come up here to the third floor to the assembly room, you can see how part of health and wellness is being with people who are also on the same journey as you and having that community aspect. But if you were to go behind us into just down the hallway, you would find the gymnasium, which when it was built, was the largest gymnasium in Arkansas. That's where you would have found professional boxers and professional baseball players and people who were joining this new fitness culture in the gym. It doesn't look like a gym that we would be familiar with today. It's full of things like Indian clubs and calisthenics wands, but it really sort of strikes people's interest as they walk through and think, I wonder if I could get really fit in that room.
Besides the bathhouses, there's also other areas around the park. Are there hiking trails?
Absolutely. So we have about 26 miles of hiking trails. And what I try to tell visitors when they ask is that these aren't normal hiking trails. They're not planned for a destination or a lookout necessarily, though we have those. These were specifically developed as rehabilitation trails. As you go through your health journey here in Hot Springs, maybe you would increase the elevation of your hike. So at the first week, maybe you're just walking on this flat path, but by week 3 of your treatments here in Hot Springs, you're climbing up to the top of Hot Springs Mountain and getting those legs moving. And so this system of Ortel trails was reflecting a German physician and his idea of how to use the outdoors as actual graduated fitness locations.
In the 1800s and early 1900s, about how long did someone stay when they came here to visit?
So we can even answer that question in the tickets that we see in our archives, but it's 21 baths. So you would come here for 21 baths. This was, in essence, your first travel and leisure location because you would stay here for so long. That's why the buildings downtown are so nice. That's why these bathhouses are trying to accommodate people, because they had to be able to accommodate people for weeks at a time. And your medical bathing locations are the heart of middle-class travel at that time. They would actually tell people, hey, come to Hot Springs. This is where you can learn how to go on vacation.
What were some of the illnesses that people were coming here to be healed of?
Sure. So it was a whole variety of things that you would want to seek water cure for today. And in some sense, you could ask yourself, if you sit in a warm bath or go to a spa, what are you hoping to be healed from? But for people back in the day, it might be arthritis. Maybe they would have lost, a lot of soldiers would come here and maybe they had lost a limb in battle. People would come here for diseases in their intestines. You would not come for anything in your lungs or in your heart. They saw negative correlations. But you might come for mental health reasons. You were just high on anxiety and you wanted to be able to learn to relax. And so what you would actually do if you were to visit is you would go to a doctor and you would say, I need a prescription. Can you give me the treatment profile that I need to have? And that doctor might say, all right, you're going to go to the bathhouse. You have arthritis in your leg, and maybe you lost a limb, or maybe you're suffering from a skin affliction. You need to go to the bathhouse, get a bath, sit in the vapor cabinet. Then you need to go to the sitz bath. Then you need to get a hot towel wrap. Then you need to get the needle shower. And you would go through this whole step, and the bath attendants were effectively your nurses. And so they were using the hot springs water, this 4,400-year-old water, to treat you of the illnesses of the day. And especially at that time during the Industrial Revolution, they saw these illnesses as being the illnesses of civilization, of modernity. And so they might say, yes, I have this specific illness, but overall they were saying, these are the illnesses of an industrializing nation, and we need to go to this rural place away from the cities to be treated for these new illnesses that seem to be spreading.
Do people still come here today for baths?
Absolutely. So our heyday, the golden age of bathing, was in the 19-teens and 20s. We actually would have the most baths in the 1940s, especially right after World War II. But then with the rise of pharmaceutical medicine, specifically penicillin, you started to see the large numbers of people who are seeking out bathing go on the decline. But we still today We'll have people who come for the novelty of the baths. We have 2 open bathhouses, the Buckstaff and the Quapaw, and they have different types of bathing regimens that you can go through. But then there are a lot of people who they would prefer sort of this holistic health and wellness. And so this is not just a place of the past that we protect at Hot Springs, but we continue to protect for the health and wellness of the present and the future.
Do you see any challenges here as a national park in this, I guess, urban area that we're around? What challenges do you face, if any?
When we think about Hot Springs, it's in close proximity to this urban community. So we have to think about sharing our resources with our community partners. And so that might look like protecting the recharge zone, even as we have development in the community. It might do with invasive plants that come into our park because our borders are right next to each other. Or it might even be adapting these historic buildings for modern use and sort of thinking creatively about meeting modern needs of our visitors.
So that's going to segue into our challenge. So we're going to be using UN Global Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. This is how we're going to frame our challenge today. As we know, the Hot Springs National Park has been federally protected since 1832. So our task is to learn more about the Hot Springs National Park and investigate the ways they can engage their surrounding community in watershed protection and the preservation of the thermal springs recharge zone. Without the recharge zone, which enables rain to flow deep into the earth, and a healthy watershed, this ancient thermal springs could become compromised. And did you know everyone from small towns to big cities live in a watershed? So we also want you to take what you've learned today and implement those ideas in your own communities to protect and sustain your water quality and quantity. If we all work together, we can protect the health of our water resources on a greater scale. We want to see your ideas for the national parks, but no more than Ranger Kane. He is so excited to see what you can come up with because he wants to be able to stay here for a long time and he loves this place and wants to keep it sustainable. So you're going to tag me at Dacia 92, but you're also going to tag Hot Springs because Ranger Kane wants to see your ideas. This place, for just a moment, just makes me feel better. Like knowing that it's for your health, like in all of your health, right? Your mental and emotional health and your physical health. This, I think you've come back home, right? To the place that you love. But I think that you're in your sweet spot right now. You know, we have kids out there that are really interested. They've watched 100 of these already, and they're really interested in getting your job. No offense, but they want your job or at least to work beside you.
Sure.
Can you tell the kids some things that they can start doing right now to prepare for a job in the national parks?
Absolutely. So when we talk about ways to get into the parks, as a student, I learned about history and the environment. But then when I wanted to start working in the parks, I became an intern. I reached out to that specific park and I said, you know, do you have something that you need help for that I can provide assistance to? But I've also worked as an intern with NCPE, which is a preservation organization with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We have people who are SCA interns, Student Conservation Association, YCC interns, and these are all ways to get a national park on your resume or just to become familiar to you, to consider all the different ways to be a park ranger, from being an interp and education ranger, to being a law enforcement ranger to protect the resources, to be a facilities ranger so that you can help make sure that buildings stay sustainable, to working in the natural resources or the cultural resources, whether in the museum or as the biology tech, planting and preserving animal habitats. And so I've worked with all of these different ways, from interns to volunteers to applying on usajobs.gov as a way to begin my own park journey.
And you had a lot of persistence in this because you said this took 9 years of your, and I like that because kids need to learn how to build up their grit, if you will, and their persistence.
The mission of the National Park Service is to protect and preserve our landscapes and our stories for present and future generations. And that is a wonderful mission. It's a big responsibility. Sometimes we have to balance between preserving landscapes and then allowing access, but that same constant rethinking of our own journey for protecting parks is part of our journey for being a park ranger, where you have to constantly say, what am I in this for? What am I willing to give back as a public servant? And so when we imagine being a park ranger, it's not just about you. You get to contribute back, and that journey can take a long time to learn all the ways to be able to continue to give.
Well, we talk to our kids about when your passion intersects your purpose, you found your career for life, and I think that's what you have found here. I want to thank you so much for allowing us to come here today. Looks like the storms are going down just a little bit, but this was a beautiful place to film, and we can't wait for all the kids in the country to learn more about the story of Hot Springs and come up with some ideas to help you.
We look forward to all their creative ideas. It's going to be a wonderful collaboration with these students.
So again, thank you so much, kids, for joining us today. Thank you to the National Park Foundation for providing funding for this. We are excited to see what you come up with. So on behalf of Dr. Drizzle and Ranger Kane, we are out of here.